He wasn't supposed to be there. A canceled flight, a screaming storm, and a little girl tugging at his sleeve. That's all it was supposed to be. But when Ethan Cross looked across that terminal and saw a woman's wrist locked in a man's grip, something older than instinct took over. He'd walked away from war. He'd buried the soldier he used to be. He thought that part of him was gone. He was wrong. If you've ever been rescued by a stranger or wished you had been, drop your city in the comments, hit like, and stay until the very end. This one will stay with you. Newark Liberty International Airport had been running on borrowed time since 3 in the afternoon. By 7 that evening, the departure boards had turned into a graveyard. Flight after flight blinking from delayed to canceled as the nor'easter pushed inland from the coast, dumping 18 inches on the runway and showing no signs of politeness about it. The terminal was standing room only, packed with the kind of crowd that forms when travel plans collapse and people have nowhere to put their frustration. Gate agents ducked behind their counters. The PA system bleated the same useless announcement every 12 minutes. The McDonald's near gate C22 had run out of large cups. Ethan Cross had found a strip of floor space near a support column on the far wall of Terminal B, his back against the concrete, his carry-on wedged between his knees, and his 8-year-old daughter sleeping against his left shoulder with her mouth open and a thin line of drool on his jacket sleeve. He didn't move to wipe it off. Lily had fought sleep for 2 hours, asking questions about the snow, about the airplanes that couldn't fly, about whether the pilots were scared of thunder the same way regular people were. He'd answered each one honestly, which meant some answers were longer than she'd expected and some were shorter. She'd eventually run out of questions somewhere around 8:30 and gone under fast, the way children do, like a light switch. Ethan studied the terminal the same way he'd once studied patrol routes. Not because he expected anything, just because old habits don't retire. They just change their clothes. He counted exits, noted the security desk to his left, tracked the rhythm of foot traffic. His brain had been doing this since Fallujah, and 12 years of civilian life hadn't managed to retrain it. He looked ordinary enough that people didn't look twice. Medium build, though the jacket hid the fact that there wasn't much softness underneath it. Dark hair that was maybe 2 weeks past due for a cut. A face that had taken some weather over the years. Not hard, exactly, but settled, the way wood gets when it's been outside long enough. He was 35 and could pass for 32 or 38, depending on the light, and how much sleep he'd gotten. Tonight it was probably 38. His phone buzzed. A message from his sister in Portland asking if they'd made it out. He typed back a single word, stranded, and pocketed it. Across the terminal, maybe 40 feet away, something shifted. It wasn't loud. That was the first thing. The man's voice was controlled, calibrated. The kind of low that was designed to not carry past 2 people while still landing like a fist. Ethan didn't hear the words. He saw the geometry of it. A man in a charcoal overcoat standing close, too close, to a woman near the terminal entrance, one hand on her upper arm, the other gesturing in that small, chopping way that means you will listen to me. The woman's body was angled back and slightly away, her weight on her rear foot, chin tucked. Not a posture of conversation, a posture of someone who needed 3 more feet of distance and wasn't being given it. Ethan watched for 4 seconds. Around them, the terminal kept moving. A family with a stroller rolled past. A teenager walked by with headphones in. 2 men in suits stared at their laptops and did not look up. Ethan looked down at Lily. Her cheek was pressed against the side of his arm, eyelid still. He waited, took maybe 3 more seconds to do so, then carefully slid his jacket out from under her head and replaced it with his carry-on, angling it so it wouldn't roll. She stirred, but didn't wake. He stood up. The man's name, Ethan would learn later, was Damien Vale. But in that moment, walking across Terminal B with his hands loose at his sides, Ethan didn't need a name. He needed about 6 more feet of ground to cover and a read on the situation that matched what his body was already telling him. The woman, Victoria, though he didn't know that yet either, had her jaw set in that particular way people set it when they're working very hard not to show anything. She was dressed for a business flight. Dark blazer, slacks, a carry-on at her feet that probably cost more than Ethan's monthly car payment. Her hair was pulled back, though some of it had come loose, and she hadn't fixed it. Her eyes were moving, door to man to door again, in the rhythm of someone calculating odds. Damian Vale was handsome in the way that expensive suits and regular gym memberships can make a man handsome. Early 40s, jaw like it was carved with an opinion about it. He had the posture of a man who'd never been told no in a room where the answer mattered. Ethan stopped about 4 feet away. "Hey," he said, not loud. Conversational almost. The word was a stone dropped into still water. Damian turned. His expression shifted through surprise, then landed on dismissal. "Excuse me?" "Just checking in," Ethan said. He looked at Victoria. "Everything all right?" There was a half-second where the question hung in the air between all three of them. It was the kind of question that already knew the answer but was offering something. A door, an exit ramp, the possibility of a different outcome. Victoria looked at him. Ethan had seen that look before. Not on a battlefield. On a triage line, once outside Ramadi. A kid who'd been told to keep pressure on a wound for 40 minutes and finally saw a medic coming. The particular look of someone who's been holding something alone for too long. "She's fine," Damian said. "We're having a private conversation. If you could just—" "I wasn't asking you," Ethan said. The temperature around them dropped by about 3 degrees. Damian's hand was still on Victoria's arm. Ethan noticed it the way he noticed all physical details. Automatically, precisely, filed away. Damian smiled. It was the smile of a man who believed in social hierarchy the way some people believe in gravity. Not because he'd tested it, but because it had always held. "I don't know who you are, but this is a private matter between—" "Your hand," Ethan said. Damian paused. "What?" "Take it off her arm." The words came out flat. No edge, no volume, nothing theatrical, just information being delivered. Something in Damian's expression flickered. Surprise at the lack of aggression, maybe, or the recalibration that happens when a man who's used to being the most dangerous presence in any room suddenly isn't sure that's true anymore. His hand dropped. Victoria pulled her arm back. She didn't say anything. She breathed. "Who are you?" Damian said. His voice had changed register, still controlled, but there was something tight in it now. "Nobody important," Ethan said. "You want to keep this going, we can, but I don't think that's where you want tonight to go." Damian looked at him. Ethan looked back, the kind of silence that has weight. Damian Vale had built his career on knowing which battles to fight in which rooms. He was good at it. He adjusted his cuffs, picked up the briefcase at his feet, and for one moment his eyes moved to Victoria with something in them that wasn't anger exactly. It was worse than anger. It was a promise. "This isn't finished," he said to her, quietly. Then he walked away toward the far end of the terminal, smooth and unhurried, like a man who'd simply changed direction. "Ma'am." Ethan stood where he was until Damian's overcoat disappeared into the crowd. Then he turned back to Victoria. She was looking at him with an expression he couldn't fully categorize. Part relief, part assessment, part something complicated that might have been embarrassment. "I had it under control," she said. "I know," he said. She blinked. That's not usually how people respond to that. What do people usually say? Something like it didn't look like it. "Well," Ethan said, "you were managing. You just had one more option available than you were using." Victoria looked at him for a moment. Then she exhaled, one long breath that seemed to carry a lot of weight with it. Her shoulders dropped a fraction of an inch, barely perceptible, but there. "Thank you," she said. She didn't say it easily. It cost something. "Sure." He glanced back toward the wall where Lily was sleeping. "I've got to get back to my daughter." "You have a—" She stopped, looked toward where he gestured. "She's sleeping through all of this?" "She's 8. She can sleep through a helicopter landing." Something shifted in Victoria's expression. Not quite a smile, but the beginning of one. "That's—" She caught herself, and the beginning of the smile went away. Her jaw tightened again. She was already somewhere else in her head. Ethan could see it. Whatever had just been interrupted between her and Damian Vale was still very much in motion inside her. He almost left it there. He almost walked back to his column, his carry-on, his sleeping daughter, and let the woman who said she had it under control go back to having it under control. But he didn't. "You don't have somewhere to go tonight," he said. It wasn't a question. He'd seen the body language when Damien walked away. The way she'd looked toward the exit and then not moved. The way her eyes had tracked the departures board with something that looked less like hope and more like the absence of options. Victoria stiffened slightly. "I'm fine. I didn't say you weren't. I'll find a hotel." "Every hotel from here to Midtown is booked," he said. "I called 3 before I sat down. Storm hit earlier than they predicted." She looked at him sharply. "How did you—" "I didn't. I'm just telling you what I found." He paused. "You can check yourself if you want." Victoria said nothing for a moment. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out her phone, and Ethan watched her tap through it for about 30 seconds before her expression confirmed what he'd said. She put the phone away slowly. "I'm Ethan," he said. She looked at him. "Victoria. The man who just left. Is he going to be a problem?" Something moved behind her eyes. A calculation. The decision of how much truth to give a stranger in an airport at 8:45 on a Wednesday night when the whole world had been rerouted. "Yes," she said finally. "He's going to be a very serious problem." "Okay, cool." They sat on opposite ends of a row of empty gate seats, Lily still sleeping against her father's shoulder on the far side, while Victoria sat with her hands around a paper cup of terrible terminal coffee that had gone cold. She wasn't drinking it. She was holding it the way people hold things when they need something for their hands to do. Ethan waited. He'd learned early, in the field, later in fatherhood, that people tell you what they need to tell you if you give them enough space to find it. "He's my fiancé," Victoria said. Then, is, I don't know what the tense is anymore. "How long?" 11 months in, she turned the cup in her hands. "And he's an executive in my company, which makes the whole thing—" She stopped. "It makes it complicated." "More than the personal part?" "The personal part I can survive." Her voice was matter-of-fact, the way people sound about things they've already decided about. "The professional part is, there's a board vote in 4 days, and I think—" She stopped again, looked at the cup. "I know he's been positioning against me. I've suspected it for a while. Tonight," she pressed her lips together. "We had a conversation. It confirmed some things." "What kind of positioning?" She looked at him sideways. "You know what corporate restructuring is? Enough. Then you know that if you control enough board relationships and enough financial infrastructure, you can make a CEO's position untenable without ever saying a single outright hostile word." She set the cup down on the seat beside her. "He's been doing it for 6 months at least, maybe longer. And the meeting on Friday is where it was all going to land." Ethan was quiet for a moment. "Do you have documentation?" "Some, not enough." She exhaled. "My lawyer has been working on it, but Damien's careful, very careful." "How did tonight happen?" "I told him I knew." Victoria said it simply. I thought if I told him I knew, he would back off. Buy me time." A pause. "That was poorly reasoned." "It got you the confirmation you needed." She looked at him. Something shifted in her expression. The same flicker of reassessment she'd given him when he'd said, "I know," in response to her claim that she had it handled, like she was adjusting an assumption. "Yes," she said. "It did." From Ethan's right, a small voice said, "Dad?" Lily was awake, blinking and disoriented, her hair flattened on one side. She looked at her father, then at the woman sitting several feet away, then back at her father with the direct, unedited curiosity that 8-year-olds reserve for adults they haven't decided about yet. "Who's that?" Lily asked. Not unkind, just factual. "This is Victoria," Ethan said. "We met just now." Lily examined Victoria with the gravity of a very small judge. "Were you crying?" she asked. "Lily," Ethan said. "She has that look," Lily said, "like when you almost cry but you don't." Victoria looked at the child for a moment. Then she said, "I was having a hard night, but it got better." Lily considered this. "Our flight got canceled," she said. "That was also hard." "I heard. I'm sorry." Dad says delays are part of travel, Lily said, in the tone of someone who has been told something several times and finds it only partially convincing. She looked at her father. Can I have the crackers? Ethan reached into the side pocket of his carry-on and handed over a small pack of peanut butter crackers without comment. Lily began eating them and looked out the window at the snow blowing sideways across the runway. Victoria watched the child for a moment. Then she looked at Ethan. Something in her face had changed, smaller, less defended. I genuinely don't know what to do tonight, she said. Not the version of the sentence that's an invitation for someone to fix something. The honest version. Ethan thought about it for a moment. He pulled out his phone. I know someone, he said. Former SEAL. He runs a private security operation out of Jersey City now. He's got a place. Not fancy, but it's safe and it's real, and Damien Vale will not know it exists. He looked up. I can call him. He'll answer. Victoria stared at him. You would do that for someone you met 45 minutes ago. 20, Ethan said, glancing at the clock above the gate. 20 minutes ago. You're in a bad spot, he said. I know what that looks like, and you don't have better options tonight. He held up the phone slightly. I'm not asking for anything. It's a phone call. She studied him the way people study something they're trying to find the catch in. There was no catch. He'd learned somewhere between his first tour and the morning Lily was born that helping someone didn't have to be complicated. It just had to be done. Okay, Victoria said. He dialed. Outside, the storm pressed against the glass, fat snow spinning under the terminal lights. Lily finished her crackers and folded the wrapper into a very small square, the way Ethan had taught her. The departure board behind them flipped again, another flight blinking out. Ethan Cross had walked into this airport expecting nothing more complicated than a 2-hour flight home and a daughter who'd ask too many questions about clouds. He hadn't expected this. But then, he hadn't expected most of the things that had actually mattered. Marcus Webb answered on the second ring. That was the thing about Marcus. He'd been answering on the second ring since Ethan had known him, which was going on 14 years now, back to a fire base outside Kandahar, where they'd spent 3 weeks eating the same 4 ration options and arguing about baseball. Marcus had always been the kind of man who picked up, not because he didn't have other things going on, because he'd decided somewhere along the way that being reachable was a choice worth making. Cross, Marcus said. No greeting, just the name, the same way he'd always said it. I've got a situation, Ethan said. What kind? Someone needs a safe place tonight. Female, professional. She's got a problem with a man who has resources and knows how to use them. I need somewhere he won't think to look. A pause. The sound of Marcus moving somewhere, a door closing. She hurt? No, not yet. You trust her? Ethan looked at Victoria, who was sitting straight-backed in the airport seat, watching him with an expression that had nothing passive in it. Working on it, he said. But yeah, enough. Bring her to the Halstead Street place. I'll call Deb and make sure the back unit's open. Another pause. You staying? I've got Lily. Lily can have the couch. She likes the couch. She likes your couch because you let her eat cereal on it and watch things she's not supposed to watch. That's why kids like couches, Ethan. Ethan almost smiled. I'll call you when we're moving. He hung up and turned to Victoria. It's arranged. She looked at him steadily. Just like that. Marcus is a good man. The place is clean, and it's not connected to anything you're connected to. Damien Vale would have to work very hard to find it, and he'd have to know to look first. How do you know he won't? Because I'm the only person who knows where it is, Ethan said, and I don't have a reason to tell him. Victoria absorbed this. She picked up the cold cup of coffee, realized it was cold, and set it back down. I feel like I should ask more questions, she said. That's what a reasonable person would do. That's what a person with more options would do, Ethan said. Not unkindly, just straight. Something moved across her face, not quite agreement, but close enough. She reached down and picked up her carry-on. All right, she said. Let's go. Bob. They shared a cab out of the airport because Marcus's contact didn't arrive for another 40 minutes, and the terminal had become the kind of crowded that makes people mean. Lily sat in the middle of the back seat, eating the last of the peanut butter crackers and watching the snow out the window with the same focused interest she gave to everything she hadn't seen before. Victoria sat against the far door with her phone in her lap, scrolling through something. Her jaw was tight. She kept stopping on certain screens, not reading exactly, more like confirming things she already suspected and finding them. Ethan didn't ask. He watched the city move past the window, gray and white and blurred. "The transfers started 8 months ago," Victoria said, without looking up. Ethan glanced at her. Lily was still watching the window. "Small ones at first," Victoria continued. Her voice was flat in a way that meant she was keeping something controlled underneath it. "Under the threshold that triggers automatic review. Then bigger ones, but structured, spread across accounts, across entities, nothing that reads as a single transaction." She stopped scrolling. "He built the structure before we were even engaged. He was doing this while we were—" She stopped. "You don't have to explain," Ethan said. "I'm not explaining." She said it quickly, then quieter. "I'm thinking out loud. I need to think out loud, or I'm going to lose the thread." Lily looked over at Victoria with the unguarded directness she'd inherited from nobody in particular. Ethan's ex-wife had been cautious, nearly guarded. Lily had come into the world with some other setting entirely. "Are you in trouble?" she asked. "Lily," Ethan said. "Dad, I can tell when someone's in trouble. You always say paying attention matters." Ethan opened his mouth and closed it again. Victoria glanced at the child. "Some people tried to take something that belongs to me," she said. "Careful, honest, the way you talk to a kid who won't accept softened versions." "I'm trying to figure out how to get it back." Lily chewed the last cracker and thought about this. "Did you build it yourself?" she asked. Victoria looked at her. "Yes." "Then it's definitely yours," Lily said, with the iron certainty of an 8-year-old who had not yet learned that ownership was complicated. She went back to the window. Something happened in Victoria's face. Small, barely visible, a tightening around the eyes that might have been the beginning of something she didn't let arrive. She looked back down at her phone. Ethan said nothing. The cab moved through the snow. The Halstead Street apartment was on the 3rd floor of a narrow brick building wedged between a dry cleaner and a place that sold used musical instruments. The hallway smelled like old wood and someone's dinner from 2 floors up. The elevator didn't work. The staircase was fine. Deborah Webb, Marcus's wife of 11 years, a former Army nurse who had opinions about everything and shared them freely, was waiting with the door open when they came up the stairs. She was in her 50s, solidly built, with reading glasses pushed up on her forehead and an expression that said she'd assessed the situation before anyone had said a word. "Marcus said you needed somewhere quiet," Deb said, looking at Victoria. "Yes, thank you. You look like you need to sit down and eat something," Deb said. Not unkind, just efficient. She looked at Lily. "I have cereal." Lily's face lit up with a speed that Ethan found mildly alarming. "What kind?" "The kind your father probably thinks is too sugary." "That's the best kind," Lily said. "I know it is." Deb stepped back to let them in. The apartment was small but solidly arranged. A living area with a worn couch and bookshelves that had been genuinely used, a kitchen with good light, a back bedroom with a door that locked, clean without being staged. It smelled like coffee in somebody's life. Ethan set his carry-on down and turned to Victoria, who was standing in the middle of the living room looking around with the expression of someone recalibrating what they expected. "You'll be safe here," he said. "Deb and Marcus will be upstairs. He's not soft, and she's not either." Victoria nodded slowly, then, "Why are you doing this?" "Doing what?" "This." She gestured, at the apartment, at Lily, who was already at the kitchen table while Deb pulled down cereal boxes, at the whole arrangement. "You don't know me. You have a daughter to take care of, and a canceled flight, and 100 other things that have nothing to do with me. Why are you here?" Ethan thought about it for a real second before answering. Not performing thought, actually finding the answer. "Because you needed help," he said. "And I could." He paused. "That's the whole thing. There isn't more to it." She looked at him like she was checking the sentence for fine print. She didn't find any, and that seemed to be its own kind of problem. Like a person who's spent years with hands that always wanted something, finding themselves in a room where nobody was reaching. Okay, she said quietly. Tut. Lily fell asleep on the couch at 10:15 with a cereal bowl on the coffee table and the television on low. Deb covered her with a blanket, moved the bowl to the kitchen, and went upstairs without making a production of any of it. Ethan stayed. He wasn't entirely sure why. He told himself it was because the snow was still coming down and there was nowhere to go, and Lily was already settled. Both of those things were true, and neither was the whole story. Victoria had sat up at the kitchen table with her laptop open and her phone beside it and a legal pad she'd pulled from her carry-on. She wrote in small, precise handwriting, lists, arrows between items, dates in the margins. She worked the way people work when they've gotten very good at thinking under pressure and are using that skill against a problem that has a clock on it. Ethan sat across from her with a mug of coffee Deb had left in the pot. He didn't offer to help. He wasn't qualified to help. He just stayed. After a while, Victoria said, without looking up, he started with the subsidiary structures. There's a holding company registered in Delaware, which is not unusual, but the beneficial ownership is obscured through 2 layers of LLCs that aren't connected to anything I authorized. She tapped the legal pad. If I can show those LLCs received transfers that match the amounts missing from the operating accounts, that's not a business dispute. That's fraud. How long to prove it? Depends on what my forensic accountant can pull in 3 days. She looked up. The board meeting is Friday. If I walk into that room without documentation, Damien controls the narrative. He's already spent months building one. What does his narrative say? She sat back slightly. That I've been mismanaging capital, that growth projections are overstated, that the company needs new leadership at the executive level, meaning the board should restructure my authority while I retain the title. A soft removal. Her voice carried no inflection when she said it. Pure information. It's elegant, actually. He doesn't have to fire me. He just makes me irrelevant inside my own company. Ethan turned his mug in his hands. Would the board believe that, based on what you've actually done? 3 of the 7 board members were introduced to me through Damien. Those relationships aren't neutral anymore. She looked at the legal pad. So yes, if he walks in first with the right framing, 2 of the remaining 4 would want to wait and see rather than stand against him. That leaves me with 2 reliable votes and a tiebreaker I can't predict. Who's the tiebreaker? A man named Harlan Kotz. He's 71 years old and has been on the board since my Series A. He doesn't like Damien, and he doesn't particularly like me either, but he cares about the company because he believed in it when nobody else did. She paused. I don't know how he votes if the evidence isn't clean. Ethan thought about this. So the path is documentation. The path is documentation, she confirmed, which means the next 72 hours matter more than the last 4 years. She picked up her pen, then set it down again. She looked at him. What did you do before security consulting? Navy, 14 years. SEAL? Yes. She considered him. That's not nothing to walk away from. It was time, he said. The answer he gave when he didn't want to give the longer one. She seemed to recognize that. She didn't push. Do you miss it? He thought about the true version of the answer. Parts. The parts that felt clear. You know exactly who you're protecting and why and what the threat looks like. He looked into the coffee mug. Civilian life is murkier. The threat doesn't announce itself. No, she said. It gets engaged to you. He looked up. The joke had landed flat because it wasn't really a joke. It was just a fact she'd found a dark edge on. Something about that was more honest than humor would have been. How did you build it? He asked. The company. She looked at him, unsure why he was asking. You don't have to talk about it, he said. No, it's... She settled back in the chair. I started coding when I was 14 because it was cheaper than therapy and my parents couldn't afford either. A beat. I had an idea when I was 26 about how hospitals were wasting money on diagnostic routing. Basically, the process of getting the right test to the right patient at the right time is shockingly inefficient, even in good facilities. I wrote the first version of the software in 8 months, mostly nights and weekends while I was working somewhere else. She glanced at the laptop. I got one investor, then another. It took 3 years to get the first hospital to try it. When they did and it worked, the second one came faster, and then the third. She was quiet for a moment. It's not a remarkable story. Most of it was just not quitting. That's exactly what makes it remarkable, Ethan said. She looked at him with the checking for fine print expression again. Most people quit, he said. The story isn't about the idea. It's about staying in the room when it would have been easier to leave. Victoria looked at the table. She pressed her thumbnail against the edge of the legal pad. Damien said, when I first told him about the board situation, he said, "You've always been better at building things than protecting them." She said it evenly. He meant it as something to fix, as something he could provide. He said that to you, and you stayed engaged to him. I thought he was right, she said. I thought I needed someone who understood the boardroom in ways I didn't, who could manage the politics I was too busy building to play. A small, airless laugh. It turns out I was right about needing help with the politics. I was wrong about who was actually doing them. At 11:30, Marcus came downstairs in old clothes with a beer in one hand and sat at the far end of the table without being invited. He looked at Victoria's legal pad, at the laptop, at the list of entity names she'd written in careful columns. Walk me through the structure, he said. Victoria looked at him, then at Ethan. Ethan made a slight motion. Your call. She turned back to Marcus and walked him through it. The holding company, the LLCs, the transfer patterns, the timing relative to board communications she'd found in archived emails. She was precise and fast and didn't over-explain. Marcus listened without interrupting, which was something Ethan had always respected about him. The man had no interest in talking when someone else had information worth hearing. When she finished, Marcus set his beer down. The timestamps on those transfers, he said. You said they correlate with board communication. You mean they preceded board communications? Victoria paused. Yes, by 4 to 7 days in most cases. So he was moving money in advance of conversations where the company's direction was being set. Marcus looked at the table. That's not just fraud, that's insider positioning. The legal exposure on that is different. That's what my lawyer said, Victoria said, but only if I can connect the entities to him directly. What do you need to do that? Corporate filings. The Delaware records are public, but they're structured to obscure. The registered agent is a law firm, not a person. I need someone to trace the beneficial ownership, and that takes either subpoena power or someone very good with corporate research. Marcus looked at Ethan. Ethan looked at Marcus. Claire Sung, they said at approximately the same time. Victoria looked between them. Who is Claire Sung? Former NCIS, Marcus said. She does private corporate forensics now. She's the best at following money through legal structures in a way that will hold up under scrutiny. She's expensive, Ethan said. Can you afford expensive? Marcus asked Victoria. Yes, she said. She said it the same way she'd said everything. No cushioning, no performance, just fact. I'll reach out to her tonight, Marcus said. He picked up his beer. She won't answer tonight, but she'll see it and she'll call in the morning. He looked at Victoria again, the direct, uncalculated look of someone who had learned to assess people in environments where getting it wrong had consequences. You've got a real problem, he said, but it's not a hopeless one. Victoria met his eyes. I know, she said. Then, I just haven't had anyone else say that in a while. Marcus nodded once, the way military men nod when they've registered something and don't need to make more of it. He stood up. Guest room's down the hall. Lock works. If you need anything, knock on the ceiling. Literally. There's a broom in the closet. He went back upstairs. Victoria sat quietly for a moment, then she looked at Ethan. Why do I feel like I just had a conversation with two people who've had this kind of night before? She said. Because you did, Ethan said. Not this specifically. No, but the shape of it. Someone in a bad spot who needed something concrete. He looked at the door Marcus had gone through. We've both been in places where the help that mattered wasn't speeches and reassurance. It was logistics and somebody staying in the room. She nodded slowly. She looked at the laptop, but she wasn't reading anymore. What's her name, your daughter? Lily. She's something, Victoria said. The way she just decided things are either right or wrong and moved on. It's a phase, Ethan said, though he wasn't sure he believed that. She complicates it as she gets older. Maybe, Victoria picked up her pen, or maybe she's just not scared of it yet. Ethan said nothing. He wasn't going to argue with that. Look, she worked until past 1 in the morning, the legal pad filling up, the laptop screen reflecting in her eyes. Ethan stayed for another hour, mostly in silence, saying things when things needed to be said and not otherwise. Lily slept on the couch with the blanket pulled up to her chin, making the small, unconscious sounds of a child completely at rest. At some point, Victoria looked up and said, "You should sleep." "I'm fine." "You're not." She looked at him with the directness she'd used for everything. "You have a child who's going to wake up in 4 hours with questions. You need to sleep." Ethan considered this and found it reasonable. He moved to the armchair near the couch. Lily, 3 feet away, him angled toward the door. He was asleep in under 10 minutes, the way men who've learned to sleep in difficult places can manage. Not deeply, not without awareness, but enough. Victoria stayed at the kitchen table. She found what she was looking for at 2:47 in the morning. It was buried in the transfer records. A sequence she'd half noticed an hour earlier but hadn't traced all the way. A pattern of amounts that didn't correspond to any known transaction in the company ledger she'd downloaded before leaving the office 2 days ago. But the dates matched something else. They matched dates in an email thread she hadn't connected until now. Internal communications about a proposed acquisition that had never formally been presented to the board. An acquisition that, if approved, would have dramatically shifted asset allocation and benefited exactly the kind of hidden equity position that someone with prior knowledge of the deal would have quietly built. She stared at the screen. The scope of it was larger than she'd thought. This wasn't just Damien securing a soft power position inside her company. This was Damien building toward a transaction that would have generated returns in the tens of millions for entities nobody could see, while she ran the company, raised the capital, fought for every contract and hospital partnership and regulatory approval, and believed she was building something together. Her hands were perfectly still on the keyboard. She didn't feel what she expected to feel. She thought there would be more rage in it, the hot, immediate kind. But what was there instead was something older and quieter and colder. The feeling of understanding something completely, finally, with nothing left to interpret. She picked up her pen and wrote the date of the acquisition email at the top of a fresh page. Then she wrote the corresponding transfer amount underneath it. Then she drew a line connecting them. Then she kept working. In the living room, Ethan Cross slept in the armchair with his arms crossed and his head tilted slightly, his breathing slow. Lily had turned onto her side in sleep, one hand tucked under her cheek. They were strangers, people she'd known for 5 hours, people who had no reason to be in this apartment at this time on this night, except that a storm had canceled flights, and a man had grabbed her wrist in a terminal, and another man had noticed. Victoria looked at them for a long moment. Something in her chest did a complicated thing she didn't have words for right away. She'd built a company from a kitchen table and a notebook. She'd pitched investors who didn't believe her, fought procurement committees that underestimated her, managed employees who tested her, and maintained a composure through all of it that had sometimes cost her things she didn't price out until later. She had done it largely alone, or in the company of people who wanted to be near what she was building rather than near her. She had not, until tonight, sat in a room with people who had simply decided she was worth staying up for. She turned back to the screen. She had 3 days and a fraud case to build from scattered financial records, incomplete corporate filings, and the clock running down on a board meeting that would either confirm what she'd built or begin the process of dismantling it. She had a lawyer who was good, an accountant who was careful, and now maybe a forensic investigator named Claire Sung, who might be very good at finding what people tried to bury. And she had, on the armchair 6 feet away, a man who had walked across an airport terminal because he'd seen someone who needed help, and who hadn't, not once, asked her what he was going to get for it. She wrote another date on the legal pad. She kept working. Claire Sung called at 7:14 in the morning. Victoria had slept for 3 hours on the guest bed without meaning to. She'd sat down to read through her notes one more time and woken up still dressed, laptop open beside her, the legal pad face down on the pillow. She picked up on the first ring and was sitting upright before the second word. Marcus Webb gave me a general picture, Claire said. She had a voice that moved fast and didn't apologize for it. I need the specifics from you directly before I agree to take this. Of course. What do you need? The entity names you've identified, the transfer amounts and dates, and whatever you have on the holding structure. I'm also going to need access to your company's internal financial system. Read only is fine, but I need it to be real access, not screenshots. I can arrange that. How long will you need to assess? A brief silence. Depends on how clean the trail is. If he was careful, longer. If he got comfortable, and they always get comfortable, maybe 24 hours for the main architecture. Another pause. This is a Friday board meeting? Yes. That's tight. I'm aware of how tight it is, Victoria said. I'm not trying to discourage you, Claire said. I'm telling you what the clock looks like so you can make decisions accordingly. There's a difference. Victoria liked her immediately. Understood. When can you start? I'm already started. Send me what you have. Bajam. Ethan was in the kitchen when Victoria came out, making coffee in the particular way of someone who's located someone else's kitchen and is trying not to reorganize it. Lily was at the table eating cereal, the sugary kind again, and reading something on Ethan's phone with one elbow on the table and her chin in her hand. Claire Sung called, Victoria said. Ethan looked over his shoulder. And? She's in. I'm sending her the documentation now. She set her laptop on the counter and began forwarding the file she'd compiled overnight. She said 24 hours for the primary structure, maybe less if he got sloppy. He got sloppy, Ethan said. He poured coffee into a mug and held it out to her. She took it without thinking about it, which she noticed a half-second after the fact. The ease of the gesture. You don't know that, she said. People who feel entitled to what they're taking always get sloppy, he said. They stop double-checking because they've convinced themselves they've already won. He turned back to the coffee. I've seen it in the field. Different context, same psychology. Lily looked up from the phone. Who's sloppy? Someone we're looking for information about, Victoria said. Like a detective. Something like that? Lily considered this with the gravity she applied to most things before 7:30 in the morning, which was somehow more intense than the gravity she applied to things later in the day. Are you going to find what you're looking for? She asked. Victoria looked at her. I think so, she said. I think the information is there. I just have to find where it's been put. Lily nodded, apparently satisfied, and went back to the phone. Dad won't let me read mysteries at home because he says I get ideas, she said, to no one in particular. You do get ideas, Ethan said. Good ideas, Lily said. The last idea involved trying to pick the lock on the neighbor's garage because you thought it would be a good skill. Mr. Patterson said he didn't mind. Mr. Patterson is 82 and thought it was funny. That's different from it being a good idea. Victoria sat down across from Lily with the coffee mug. She looked at the child and felt something she hadn't been prepared for, a simple warmth, unasked for, arriving without announcement. She pushed it aside. She had 72 hours and a fraud case. Her phone buzzed. A text from a number she recognized as Damien's assistant, a woman named Priya, who had always been more loyal to the title than to the person who held it. Mr. Vale wants you to know the board package has been distributed. He looks forward to a productive meeting Friday. Victoria stared at the message for 3 seconds. Then she set the phone face down on the table. He's already moved, she said. Ethan looked at her. He's sent his board package, which means he's presented his version of the company's situation to every member before I've had a chance to respond. She kept her voice level. He's framing the conversation before I can walk into the room. Can you send your own package? My version isn't ready yet, and if I send something incomplete, he'll use the gaps against me. She pressed her fingers against the table. I need Claire to find the ownership connection before I can present anything, because without it, everything I have looks like a disgruntled executive disagreeing with her board. She paused. Which is exactly what he designed it to look like. Ethan sat down at the table across from her. He didn't say anything immediately, which she'd already learned was a pattern. He let a problem settle before he spoke about it, the way you let sediment settle in water before you look at what's underneath. "Your lawyer," he said. "Where is he on the evidentiary side?" "She," Victoria said, "Nora Vance. She's been working the employment and fiduciary angle, whether Damien violated his duties as an executive by creating competing interests. That's a cleaner legal argument, but it doesn't land the same way at a board meeting. The board doesn't think in terms of fiduciary law, they think in terms of confidence." "So you need the money trail." "I need the money trail," she confirmed. "Clean, connected, and explainable to 7 people in a boardroom who have MBAs and very little patience for complexity." Ethan looked at the table. Something was working behind his eyes. "Marcus knows some people at the Delaware Secretary of State's office," he said. "Unofficially. Old contacts from his security work. They can't pull anything that isn't public, but they can tell you what's been filed and when in a way that doesn't take 3 days." Victoria looked at him. "How unofficial?" "They make calls faster than the public search portal, that's all." She weighed it for a moment. "Ask him?" I said. Marcus made the call from the upstairs kitchen at 8:45. The answer came back before 9:30. The holding company, Valamont Capital Management LLC, a name that had not appeared in any document Victoria had access to until last night, had been registered in Delaware 14 months ago. 14 months. 3 months before Damien proposed. 8 months before the first transfer. He'd been building it before he'd put the ring on her finger. Victoria read the filing information that Marcus wrote on a notepad and pushed across the kitchen counter. She read it twice. Then she took a photograph of it with her phone and texted it to Claire Sung without comment. Claire responded in 11 seconds. "There it is." 3 words. Victoria exhaled like she'd been holding her breath since the airport. "She found something," Ethan said. He was reading her face. "She found the thread," Victoria said. "The rest is pulling." Nora Vance arrived at the Halstead Street apartment at 11 in the morning in a wool coat that still had snow on the shoulders, a document bag over one arm, and the expression of a woman who had rerouted her entire week and wanted at least minimal acknowledgement of that fact. She was in her mid-40s, short, with close-cropped natural hair, and the posture of someone who'd spent decades in rooms where she was underestimated and had made peace with using that as an advantage. She'd been Victoria's attorney for 3 years. She was the person Victoria had called from the cab last night, before Ethan had even finished giving Marcus the situation. She looked around the apartment when she came in, at Ethan near the window, at Marcus sitting at the table, at Lily, who was now drawing something on a piece of paper on the couch. She looked at Victoria. "You look like you slept in your clothes," Nora said. "I did," Victoria said. "At least you slept." She set the document bag on the table. "I need coffee, and then I need you to walk me through everything you found last night in sequence, because I've been working from your 2 a.m. text messages, and they were not exactly linear." "I was tired." "You were manic. There's a difference." Nora looked at Ethan. "You're the one from the airport." "Ethan Cross," he said. "Marcus Webb told me what you did." She assessed him briefly, the way she assessed everyone, efficiently and with no particular emotion attached. "Thank you." "It wasn't anything complicated," Ethan said. "It never is, and it almost never happens anyway." She sat down. Coffee, then the full picture. They worked through the morning at the kitchen table, Victoria, Nora, and Claire, on speakerphone, while Ethan and Marcus occupied the living room, and Lily alternated between drawing and asking questions that the adults in the kitchen occasionally answered honestly and occasionally deflected with varying degrees of success. The picture that assembled itself over 3 hours was larger and more deliberate than Victoria had presented the night before, because the night before she'd had pieces. Now they had architecture. Valamont Capital Management LLC, Damien's holding entity, had beneficial ownership that traced through a second LLC registered in Wyoming, which listed a nominee director in a pattern consistent with what Claire called a standard opacity stack. Irritating to unwrap, but unwrappable. The Wyoming entity listed a beneficial owner of record named Gareth Vale, Damien's brother, who sat on no company boards, held no executive titles, and whose only known professional activity was a small real estate operation in Connecticut. So on paper, Gareth owns it, Nora said. On the first layer of paper, Claire said through the phone speaker. But look at the signature authorization on the operating account. The person authorized to initiate transfers is listed as, and I'm reading this exactly, D. Vale, Managing Advisor, which is Damien. He gave himself wire authority on his brother's entity. Nora wrote something on her legal pad and underlined it twice. Can we connect the operating account to the transfers we pulled from Victoria's company accounts? Victoria asked. I need one more step for that, Claire said. The outgoing transfers from your company accounts terminated at a correspondent bank account I don't have direct visibility into yet, but I have the routing structure, and if your forensic accountant can pull the counterparty identifiers from your end, I can have those in 2 hours, Victoria said. Our head of finance doesn't know about any of this, but he'll pull records if I tell him it's an internal audit. She paused. He's also not connected to Damien's inner circle. He came up through operations. Make the call, Nora said. Victoria made the call. Chasim. At 1 in the afternoon, Ethan went out and came back with food. Sandwiches from a place 3 blocks over, nothing elaborate, just things that were hot and real. He set them on the counter without interrupting the conversation at the table and went back to the living room. Lily looked up from her drawing. Did you get the one with pickles? I got the one with pickles. Good. She went back to drawing. He sat down on the other end of the couch and looked at what she was making. It was a floor plan, detailed in the specific way Lily detailed things when she was being serious about them. Rooms labeled, furniture indicated by rough squares and rectangles, a section in one corner marked with a star. What is this? He asked. A house, she said. Whose? She considered. I don't know yet, she said. I just wanted to see how the rooms would fit. She turned the paper to show him better. There are 3 bedrooms, but this one here is smaller, so that's fine if one person is small. Ethan looked at the drawing. He looked at his daughter. He didn't say anything, which was the right call. At 2:30, Claire found the bridge. The counterparty identifiers Victoria's finance director had pulled matched a receiving account registered to a financial services entity in the Cayman Islands. That entity, traced through a correspondent banking relationship Claire had mapped before, had made a series of outbound wire transfers over the previous 8 months to an account at a private bank in New York. That account was held by Valamont Capital Management, LLC. The chain was complete, documented, dated. Ethan heard the shift in the room before anyone said anything. He'd spent enough time in operations to know what the sound of things changing felt like. Not loud, usually. A particular quality of silence, followed by voices that had been tightly controlled suddenly releasing a little of what they'd been holding. He walked to the kitchen doorway. Victoria was sitting with both hands flat on the table, looking at Claire's summary on the laptop screen. Nora was writing fast, filling 3 lines on the legal pad at once. Claire's voice through the speaker was still precise, still fast, but there was something under it now. The specific satisfaction of someone who has followed a thing to the end of where it went. The amounts? Victoria said. Across all identified transactions, Claire said. We're looking at approximately 9.4 million moved through the structure over 8 months. Some of it is recoverable depending on where it's sitting in the Cayman entity, but that's a separate conversation. 9.4 million, Victoria said. Not loud, almost quiet. And that's what I can confirm with the documentation you've given me in 12 hours, Claire said. A full forensic audit would likely identify more. Nora looked up from the legal pad. Her face was controlled, professionally so, but there was something behind it. This is enough, she said. Not everything, but enough for Friday. Victoria looked at her. Enough to what? Enough to put the board in a position where they cannot move forward with Damien's restructuring proposal without exposing themselves to liability. They'll have to suspend the vote and call for an independent investigation. That's not the same as winning. No, Nora said, but it's the same as not losing. And right now, not losing is what keeps you in the room long enough to win. Victoria looked at the screen again. Her jaw was set, the way it had been in the airport, that particular stillness of someone managing something large by holding very still around it. Send me the full documentation set, she said to Claire. Everything you have, formatted for a board presentation. You want me to format it for non-specialists? I want 7 people who didn't expect to be looking at a fraud case on Friday afternoon to understand it in 20 minutes, Victoria said. So yes, assume they're intelligent but not forensic accountants. Give me clarity, not comprehensiveness. Give me 4 hours, Claire said. You have 3. A brief pause. Fine. Nora left at 4 to file an emergency motion, a protective measure, she said, that would make it harder for Damien to move assets or company resources while the matter was pending. She put her coat on in the living room and paused when she saw Lily on the couch, now teaching Ethan the rules of a card game she'd apparently invented during the afternoon. She yours? Nora asked Ethan. Yes, he said, looking at the cards. She's got a lot of personality for someone her size. I'm aware, Ethan said. Lily looked up. I'm also in the room, she said. I see that, Nora said. She looked at Victoria. I'll call you by 7. Don't agree to any communications from Damien or his legal team tonight. If they reach out, send it to me. Understood. Nora left. The apartment was quieter without her in it, though she hadn't been loud. Marcus came downstairs with Deb an hour later, and somewhere in the middle of the afternoon it became something that felt almost like a regular evening. Deb making dinner in the kitchen while Marcus and Ethan talked at the table in the low, efficient way of men who've known each other long enough to communicate in partial sentences. And Lily sitting between them occasionally inserting observations that neither of them had asked for, and both of them responded to as though she'd raised a valid point. Victoria sat at the far end of the table, working. She was always working. But the quality of it had changed from what it had been at 2 in the morning. Then she'd been excavating, trying to find something buried. Now she was building, assembling what she'd found into something that would hold weight. At some point, Ethan set a plate beside her laptop without asking if she wanted food. She ate without looking away from the screen, which was the honest version of thank you that she was capable of in that moment, and he understood it as such. At 6 o'clock, the message came. Not from Damien's assistant this time. From Damien directly. Victoria. I think we both know this doesn't have to be what it's becoming. Call me. There's a version of Friday that works for both of us. She read it twice. Then she turned the phone so Ethan could see it. He read it and handed it back. He knows something's moved, she said. Or he's being cautious, Ethan said. Either way, he's nervous enough to reach out himself instead of through the assistant. He never reaches out himself when he's confident. She set the phone down. This is him feeling the ground shift. What are you going to do? Nothing, she said. I'm going to do exactly what Nora said. Send it to her and let him wonder. She looked at the phone. Which will make him more nervous. Which will make him do something. People who are nervous make moves before they've thought them through, Ethan said. Yes, she said. They do. She forwarded the message to Nora without responding and closed the phone face down. Odd. Lily fell asleep for the second consecutive night on Marcus and Deb's couch, this time having negotiated a second bowl of cereal beforehand and made Deb promise to leave the small lamp on because she didn't like waking up in rooms she didn't recognize completely. Deb agreed without making it a thing, which Ethan filed away as one of the things he liked most about Deb. He stood in the kitchen doorway at 9:30 while Victoria finished the last section of the board presentation. She had her hair down now. It had come loose over the course of the day, and she'd stopped putting it back up around 4 o'clock. She had Nora's legal pad beside her, the pages covered in her small, precise handwriting, and Claire's formatted documentation pulled up on one half of the screen while she worked on the presentation on the other. She looked tired. Not destroyed, functional, still sharp, but tired in the way of someone who has been running on the edge of their capacity for longer than just this week. Talk to me, she said, without looking up. About what? Anything that isn't fraud law. She kept typing. Tell me something normal. Ethan leaned against the doorframe. He thought about it. Lily has a science project due next week about weather systems. She wants to do it on nor'easters specifically because of tonight. Her teacher is going to think I put her up to it. Did you? I was going to suggest the water cycle. Less dramatic. That's what I said. She said drama was what made things interesting. He paused. She has strong opinions about narrative. Victoria almost smiled. Not quite. She's right, though. Don't tell her that. Why not? Because she's 8 and she already knows she's right about everything. She doesn't need documentation. Ma, Victoria did smile then. Briefly. Real. The kind that arrives before you've decided to let it. She sounds like I was at 8, she said. My mother called it exhausting. My mother calls it a lot of things too, Ethan said. Most of them affectionate in retrospect. Victoria looked at the screen. Did she... Lily's mother. Is she... She stopped. I'm sorry, that's not my business. She left when Lily was 3, Ethan said. Not like it was easy information, but not like it was devastating either. The matter-of-fact version of something that had stopped being raw and become just true. She wasn't prepared for what the life was, what I was still carrying from the service. She tried, I think, but trying and being able to are different things. Victoria was quiet for a moment. Are you angry at her? Sometimes, he said. Honestly. Not as much as I was. Mostly, I see Lily every morning and I think about how much she's missed, and I'm not sure how to feel about that for her sake. He looked at the ceiling. Lily doesn't ask about her much anymore. I don't know if that's better or worse. It's probably both, Victoria said. Yeah. She turned back to the screen. She typed for a moment, then, my parents thought what I was building was impractical, she said. My father especially. He wanted me to take a stable job, something with a pension, something that couldn't fall apart. She paused. He died 2 years before the first hospital contract came through. He never saw it work. Ethan said nothing. He knew enough to know when something didn't need a response. I used to think about that a lot, Victoria said. That he never got to see it. That I wanted him to see it more than I wanted almost anything else. She stopped typing, sat still for a moment. Now, I think if he had seen it and it had come to this, maybe it would have been worse for him. Because he would have watched someone try to take it from you. Yes. Or, Ethan said, he would have watched you take it back. She turned and looked at him. He met her eyes and didn't look away. There was something in the room that hadn't been there yesterday. Not named, not examined, just present, the way temperature is present, the way you know the quality of light has changed without being able to say exactly when it shifted. He wasn't going to say anything about it, and neither was she, and they both understood that, and it sat between them cleanly. Get some sleep, he said. You have a board presentation to give in 48 hours. I know. You can't walk in there running on 3 hours and stubbornness. I've walked into harder rooms on less, she said. I believe you, he said. Do it anyway. She turned back to the screen. An hour, she said. I need 1 more hour. He went to the armchair in the living room. Lily was breathing slow and even under the blanket. He sat down and watched the door and let his eyes close part way. He heard her still typing at the hour mark. Then, about 12 minutes past it, he heard the sound of the laptop being closed. Then the guest room door, quiet. He let himself fall the rest of the way into sleep. The next morning, Damien made his move. Victoria's phone lit up at 7:52 with a call from the company's chief operating officer, a man named Stuart Birch, who had been in his position for 2 years and who Victoria had promoted herself from an internal candidate pool because she'd believed he understood the mission. He was calling to let her know, with what he described as reluctance, that he would be supporting the restructuring proposal at Friday's meeting. Victoria listened to the whole call without interrupting. She asked 2 questions, both procedural, nothing personal. She thanked him for calling and said she understood his position. She hung up. Ethan was across the kitchen table, on his second coffee, watching her. Damien got to Stuart, she said. What kind of leverage? I don't know yet. She set the phone down. Stuart's a good man. He's not corrupt, so it's either fear or a promise. Either Damien showed him something that made supporting me look dangerous, or he offered Stuart something that made switching look worth it. She stared at the wall. Either way, Stuart is going to walk into that room and say he has operational concerns about leadership continuity. It's a soft argument, but from the COO, it has weight. How much does it change your count? She did the math quickly. It doesn't change my 2 reliable votes, but it gives Damien momentum going in. The COO, his 3 board relationships, and a narrative about internal instability. That's a story that writes itself. What do you need? She looked at him. Harlan Kotz, she said. The tiebreaker. I need to talk to Harlan before Friday. Then talk to him. He doesn't take meetings on short notice. He's 71 and he has a process for everything. Then ask for the meeting and explain why it's short notice, Ethan said. Tell him you have information that's relevant to his vote and that it can't wait until Friday. If he's been on your board since the beginning, he knows what you've built. Give him the chance to hear it from you before Damien's version is the only version he has. Victoria looked at him for a long moment. Not the checking for fine print look. Something straighter than that. You're very good at this, she said. At what? At seeing the direct line through things. She picked up the phone. Most people see the obstacles. You just see the path. That's what the obstacles are, he said. They're the path. You just move through them instead of around them. She held his gaze for half a second longer than necessary. Then she called Harlan Kotz. He answered on the 3rd ring. She told him what she had and what she needed in less than 90 seconds. There was a pause on the other end of the line, then the sound of a very old man shifting in a chair that had probably been his for 30 years. Tomorrow morning, Harlan said. 8 o'clock. Don't be late and don't bring a lawyer. I'll be there alone, she said. Good, he said. Bring the documentation. He hung up. Victoria lowered the phone. She sat for a moment with it in her hands, in the particular stillness that follows something going exactly as you needed it to go when you weren't certain it would. Then she turned back to Claire's documentation, opened her laptop, and kept working. Harlan Kotz lived in a brownstone in the West 70s that had been in his family since before brownstones in the West 70s cost what they cost now. The front steps were worn in the middle from decades of foot traffic. The brass knocker needed polishing. Victoria noticed both things because she noticed details when she was nervous, and she was nervous, though she would not have used that word out loud. She arrived at 7:58. Harlan opened the door himself. No assistant, no housekeeper, just a 71-year-old man in a cardigan and reading glasses pushed up on his forehead who looked at her the way he'd looked at her since the Series A meeting 11 years ago, which was the way you look at someone you're still deciding whether to fully trust. You're early, he said. By 2 minutes. That's on time. He stepped back. Come in. The house smelled like old books and coffee that had been sitting on a burner slightly too long. He led her through a narrow hallway into a study that was exactly what you'd expect from a man who'd spent 50 years in finance and then stopped caring what people thought of his office. Books stacked horizontally on top of shelves that were already full. A desk buried under papers. 2 chairs angled toward each other near a window that looked out on the street. He sat in one. She sat in the other. He didn't offer coffee. She didn't ask for any. Show me what you have, he said. She opened the document portfolio she'd put together the night before. Claire's forensic summary reduced to 12 pages, the key transaction chains highlighted, the entity structure mapped in a diagram that Nora had approved at 11 o'clock and called, in her precise way, sufficient to establish intent. She set it on the small table between the chairs. Harlan picked it up. He read slowly. He was the kind of reader who didn't move anything, not his face, not his hands, not the angle of his body in the chair. He turned pages with the same rhythm throughout. Victoria sat and let him read and did not fill the silence. It took 11 minutes. He set the portfolio down. He looked out the window at the street for a moment. A woman walking a dog, a man in a delivery uniform loading packages. Ordinary Thursday morning. Then he looked at Victoria. The Wyoming entity, he said. You've established beneficial ownership? Through the operating account signature authority and the wire instruction records. Claire Sung's name is on the forensic work. You can verify her credentials. I know who Claire Sung is. A pause. How did you find her? A contact. What kind of contact? A good one, Victoria said. Someone without a stake in any of this. Harlan looked at her. How long have you known? The full picture? 4 days. She held his gaze. I suspected something for about 6 weeks. I didn't have enough to act on. Why didn't you come to me 6 weeks ago? Because 6 weeks ago I had a feeling and some inconsistencies in a quarterly report. You would have been right to ask me for more, and I didn't have more. She paused. And because Damien had been very careful to ensure that most of the people I would naturally turn to were people he'd introduced me to. Harlan was quiet for a moment. He's been on this board for 19 months, he said, more to himself than to her. He joined 8 months after we started dating, Victoria said. I recommended him. The vote was 4-3. Harlan's jaw tightened slightly. I was one of the 3. I know, she said. He picked up the portfolio again, flipped back to the transaction timeline, set it down again. Stuart Birch called me yesterday, he said. Victoria didn't react. What did he say? That he had operational concerns about leadership continuity, that he thought the restructuring proposal was in the company's best interest. A pause. He sounded like he was reading from something. Did he seem afraid? Harlan looked at her sharply, then, yes, a little. I don't know what Damien offered him or showed him, Victoria said, but Stuart didn't make that call on his own judgment. Whatever he was given, it was enough to flip him. Stuart's been with you since year 2. I know. People don't do that easily. No, she said. They don't. Harlan sat back in the chair. He laced his fingers together over the cardigan and looked at the ceiling briefly, then back at her. There was something in his face that hadn't been there at the beginning of the meeting. Not softness, exactly, more like the particular weariness of a man who'd seen enough to know that what he was looking at was real, and was tired of the fact that it kept being real. What do you want from tomorrow? He said. Suspension of the restructuring vote pending independent investigation, Victoria said. Immediate removal of Damien's signatory authority over company accounts, and a referral of the forensic documentation to outside legal counsel. That's 3 asks. They're connected. You can't do the first without the second, and the third is what makes the first stick. The board won't move unanimously. You know that. I don't need unanimous. I need 5 votes. She looked at him. I have 2 I'm certain of. I think I have a third from Meredith Okafor. If she sees the documentation before Damien can frame it, I need you, and I need 1 more. Chen, Harlan said, without hesitating. Dennis Chen. Victoria nodded. He's been cautious about Damien's proposals before. If you approach him tonight, if I approach him. Harlan looked at her with something that might have been amusement, or might have been something harder to name. You came here asking me to make the call. I came here to show you what the situation actually is, she said. What you do with it is your decision. He studied her. He'd been studying her for 11 years in one way or another, and she'd never been sure what conclusion he'd reached. He was not a man who shared conclusions easily. You built something real, he said. I've watched you do it. That doesn't happen by accident, and it doesn't happen the way Damien's been telling it. He picked up the portfolio one more time, briefly, then set it on the table for the last time. Leave this with me. It's yours, she said. She stood. He stood. He walked her to the door himself again, which she took as something, though she wasn't certain what. At the door, Victoria. She turned. You should have come to me earlier, he said. Not harshly, just plainly. I know, she said. Don't let being capable stop you from asking for help. She held his gaze. I'm working on it, she said. He nodded. She went down the worn front steps and out to the street. She called Ethan from the corner. He picked up on the second ring, which she'd started to expect. How did it go? He said. Not a question, a prompt, open-ended, giving her room to answer it however the truth required. I don't know yet, she said honestly. He read everything. He asked the right questions. He knows Stuart was leaned on. She paused at the corner waiting for the light. He told me to leave the documentation with him. Did he say what he'd do? No, but he mentioned Dennis Chen without being prompted, and that means he's already thinking about the count. That's good. Maybe. She stepped off the curb as the light changed. Harlan Kotz doesn't make promises. He makes decisions, and then he acts on them. I won't know until I walk into that room tomorrow. Can you live with that? She thought about it for half a block. I don't have a choice. You do, though, Ethan said. That's the thing. You've done what you can do. The rest of it isn't in your hands, and it never was going to be. That's not failure. That's just where the line is. She walked for a moment in silence. The city was ordinary around her. Cabs, pedestrians, a construction crew on the opposite sidewalk doing something loud to a stretch of pavement that had done nothing to deserve it. Are you going to be there? She said. Tomorrow. A beat. Where? I don't know. Somewhere. She heard how the sentence sounded, and it was more than she'd meant to give, but she didn't take it back. Not in the room. Nora won't let anyone in the room who isn't on the legal team, but I'll be there, he said. She exhaled something she hadn't known she was holding. Okay, she said. Lily's going to ask where we're going. Tell her we're going to watch someone take something back. She heard the briefest pause, the kind she'd learned meant he was registering something he wasn't going to comment on. I'll tell her that, he said. Sit. That evening was the strangest of the strange week. Nora came at 5 with the finalized legal filing and walked Victoria through the procedural sequence for the following morning. What would be said, in what order, what documentation would be distributed when, and which arguments Damien's counsel would likely raise in response. She was brisk and comprehensive and left by 7. Marcus cooked dinner. This was apparently something he did on Thursdays, storm or no storm, house full of people he didn't know or otherwise. He made a large pot of something with sausage and white beans that Lily described as actually really good, not just polite good, which Marcus accepted as the highest available rating. They ate at the kitchen table, all of them, Victoria, Ethan, Lily, Marcus, Deb. And it was not smooth or elegant. Deb had opinions about the bean-to-sausage ratio. Marcus disagreed. Lily took Marcus's side and presented her reasoning in a 3-point argument that included the phrase statistically speaking in a context that made no statistical sense. Ethan told her so. She revised her position without conceding the point. Victoria sat in the middle of it and felt something she hadn't felt in a long time, maybe years, and didn't fully name because naming it felt like tempting something. After dinner, Lily pulled out the floor plan she'd been drawing the day before and showed it to Victoria with the seriousness of an architect presenting to a client. She explained the room configuration, the reason for the star in the corner, the theory behind the window placement. This room here, Lily said, pointing to the smallest of the 3 bedrooms, is good for someone who doesn't have a lot of stuff yet, but might get more. That's very practical, Victoria said. Dad says practical is good, Lily said, but I think it can also be pretty. She looked at Victoria with the straight, assessing look she'd given her in the cab 3 nights ago. Do you have a lot of stuff? Less than you'd think, Victoria said. Lily nodded like this confirmed something. Good, she said, and rolled the drawing up carefully. Ethan, from across the table, was looking at his coffee mug. Victoria did not look at him. She couldn't sleep. It was after midnight, and she'd been lying on the guest bed for an hour running the board meeting sequence in her head. The variables, the possible counters, the moment when Damien would understand what was happening and how he'd respond to that. She knew how he argued. She'd watched him in boardrooms for 19 months. He was good at seeming reasonable while the room shifted under the other person's feet. She got up and went to the kitchen. Ethan was in the armchair. He wasn't asleep. He heard her come in and turned his head without the sudden alertness of someone woken. He'd been awake. Lily was a slow, steady shape under the blanket. Can't sleep, she said. Not a question. You could ask me if I ever can, he said. She went to the kitchen and poured water from the pitcher on the counter, came back and sat on the far end of the couch. Close enough to talk at low volume. Not close enough for it to be something. Tell me what you're thinking, he said. That I've done everything I can do. That it might not be enough. She turned the glass in her hands. That I've spent 6 years making this company work, and in the last 72 hours, strangers have done more to help me protect it than the people I chose to have beside me. Ethan was quiet. That's not a complaint, she said. I know what it sounds like. It's not. She looked at the glass. I'm trying to figure out what I missed. How I got this far and still managed to build a life where when something went wrong, I had nobody to call. You called your lawyer, he said. Nora's excellent. She's also billing me $400 an hour. That's not nothing. No, but it's different. She looked at him. You know it's different. Yeah, he said. I know. How did you... She stopped, started again. After your wife left. After you came back from everything you came back from. How did you figure out how to be okay? He thought about it for a real moment. I didn't figure it out, he said. I just kept showing up for Lily. And showing up for her meant I had to get well enough to do that, which meant the getting well happened on the side, sort of, without me making it the project. A pause. I don't know if that's a method or just what happened. I think that's a method, she said. What's yours been? Work, she said, flat, immediate. Just more work, which turns out to also be useful but doesn't fix the same things. No, he said, it doesn't. They sat in the quiet for a while. The city was doing what it did at this hour. Reduced but not gone. Sounds filtered down to the occasional cab, a distant siren, the low movement of a place that never fully stopped. After tomorrow, Victoria said, I don't know what things look like. Nobody does. I mean, specifically, even if it goes the way I need it to go, even if the vote happens and the investigation is launched and Damien loses the ground he's built, I still have a company to run, and I've just found out that 3 of the people I built it around were either working against me or could be flipped. She paused. That's not a business problem. That's a personal one. What are you going to do with it? I don't know yet. She said it without apology. I think I'm going to need to sit somewhere quiet afterward and figure out what I actually want. Not what needs to be built or protected or proven. What I want. That sounds like a good plan, he said. It sounds like something someone says when they don't have a plan. Sometimes that's the same thing. She looked at him across the small space of the couch. He was sitting with his arms on his knees, hands loosely linked, looking toward the dark window. He looked like what he was, a man who'd done very hard things and hadn't let them make him hard, which was rarer than people thought. She'd met plenty of men who'd done hard things. Most of them had armored over the places those things had touched. Ethan wore his somewhere else. Not hidden, not displayed. Just present. Part of the material of him. I should try to sleep, she said. Yes, he said. She stood. She stood there for a moment longer than was necessary to stand. Ethan. He looked up at her. Thank you, she said. I know I've said it. I'm saying it again because the first time I said it, I was in shock, and I don't think I meant it as fully as I do right now. He held her gaze. You're going to walk into that room tomorrow, and you're going to do what you built the last 6 years to be able to do, he said. I didn't give you that. That was already yours. She looked at him for one more second. Then she went to bed. Friday morning came in gray and cold. The storm finally finished, the sky the flat white of something that had wrung itself out. Victoria dressed in the back bedroom with the kind of deliberateness that is not vanity but armor. Dark suit, good shoes, hair back, and secure. She looked at herself in the small mirror on the wall and did not do the thing of searching her face for something reassuring. She looked, noted what was there, and moved on. Nora arrived at 7:30. They went over the sequence one final time at the kitchen table while Ethan made coffee and Lily ate breakfast and did not ask questions, which was the most considerate thing Lily had done all week. At 8:15, Victoria picked up her document portfolio. She looked at the kitchen, at the table where she'd spent 3 nights, at Deb washing cups at the sink, at Marcus in the doorway with his second coffee, at Lily who had stopped eating and was looking at her with the same direct and uncalculated attention she gave to things that mattered. Good luck, Lily said. Except I don't think you need it. Victoria looked at her. Why not? Because you know more than they do, Lily said. And you're not scared of them. You're just nervous, which is different. Something moved in Victoria's chest. How do you know the difference? She asked. Lily shrugged. Scared means you think you might lose. Nervous means you want to win really badly. She picked up her spoon. You want to win really badly. Victoria held the child's gaze for a moment. Then she looked at Ethan, who was holding 2 coffee cups and wearing the expression of a man who had stopped being surprised by his daughter, but hadn't stopped finding her remarkable. She's right, he said. I know, Victoria said. She picked up her bag and walked out with Nora. The boardroom was on the 43rd floor of a building in Midtown that Victoria had signed a lease in 7 years ago when the company was 18 people and a serious idea. Now it was 400 people and a proven system, and the room where she'd presented her first annual report was the same room where Damien Vale intended to quietly end her authority over everything inside it. He was already there when she arrived. Of course he was. He would have been there early. Positioned, settled, adjusted to the room. That was his method. Control the environment, establish the frame, let others walk into a space you've already made yours. He looked up when she came in. He was in a dark suit that probably cost twice what hers did, and his expression did the thing it always did. Settled into a kind of managed pleasantness, the social veneer that he applied regardless of what was underneath. He looked, if anything, slightly less certain than usual, which meant Harlan had made his call to Dennis Chen, and Dennis Chen had said something, and Damien had felt the ground move. Good. The other board members filed in over the following 10 minutes. Meredith Okafor arrived with the expression of someone who had read something troubling the night before and was deciding what to do with it. Harlan, Victoria guessed, had been thorough. Dennis Chen did not look at Damien when he sat down. Harlan arrived last, at exactly 9 o'clock, and took his seat at the far end of the table without making eye contact with anyone. Nora sat to Victoria's right with the document portfolio closed in front of her. Damien's attorney, a man named Forsyth, who had the practiced neutrality of someone paid to appear calm in hostile situations, sat to Damien's left. The board chair, a woman named Patricia Wen, who was technically independent and practiced that independence by being equally cool to everyone in every room, called the meeting to order. We're here to consider the proposed operational restructuring, she said, as submitted by Mr. Vale in his capacity as Executive Vice President. Before we proceed to that item, she paused and looked at Nora. I understand there's a preliminary matter. There is, Nora said. She opened the portfolio. On behalf of Victoria Sterling, CEO, I'm submitting to the board a forensic financial report documenting unauthorized fund movements from company accounts through a series of third-party entities. Copies have been distributed to each board member. Her assistant moved around the table, placing bound copies in front of each person. Damien's copy landed in front of him, and he looked at it without touching it. His attorney leaned in and said something very quietly into his ear. Patricia Wen opened her copy. She read the cover page. Her expression did not change, but something behind her eyes did. Mr. Vale, she said, are you aware of the contents of this report? Damien looked up. The managed pleasantness was still there, but thinner now, stretched over something that wasn't pleasant at all. I haven't seen this document, he said, and I'd like to know why a board meeting is being used to present unverified allegations rather than— The document is verified, Victoria said. He looked at her. The directness of it, no warm-up, no procedural courtesy, seemed to take him slightly off rhythm. By whom? Claire Sung, corporate forensic investigator. Her credentials are on page 3. The underlying financial records are appended in full, with source documentation. Forsyth said something to Damien. Damien straightened slightly. I think, Forsyth said to the room, with the particular measured smoothness of an attorney buying time while his client recalibrated, we should table this item pending independent review of— That's actually what we're requesting, Nora said, with equal smoothness. Suspension of the restructuring vote pending independent investigation of the matters outlined in the report. That's motion 1. Patricia Wen looked at Harlan. Harlan Kotz, who had been sitting with his hands flat on the table since the meeting started, said, I move to suspend the restructuring vote pending independent investigation and to immediately remove signatory authority from any executive named in the forensic report. I second, said Dennis Chen without looking up from his copy. Damien's jaw tightened. The pleasantness was gone now. What was underneath it was not what most people would have expected. Not rage, not panic. Something colder and more calculated. The face of a man running options while the room was still moving. This is a coordinated attempt to— he started. Mr. Vale, Patricia Wen said. Her voice was mild and had about as much give in it as concrete. You'll have an opportunity to respond to the report's findings through proper channels. Right now, we have a motion on the floor. The vote was 5-2. Meredith Okafor voted yes. She'd read the documentation Harlan sent her the previous evening, Victoria would learn later, and had spent an hour on the phone with her own attorney before deciding. Stuart Birch voted no, which was what it was. He was the COO, and he'd made a calculation that didn't hold up, and he'd have to live with that, and he would, and it was going to cost him things he probably hadn't fully priced out yet. The other no vote was from a board member named Calloway, who had been in Damien's orbit since before the company existed, and whose vote had never been in doubt. 5-2. Patricia Wen noted the motion carried. She moved to the next order of business with the same mild efficiency she brought to everything. Damien sat in his chair and did not move for approximately 4 seconds. Then he said, with a quietness that was controlled so carefully it was its own form of expression, "This isn't finished." He'd said the same words to Victoria at the airport. She remembered it precisely. The way the words had landed like a promise he expected to keep. She looked at him across the table. "Yes," she said. "It is." The meeting ended at 11:15. Ethan was standing on the sidewalk outside the building when she came out. He had his hands in his jacket pockets and Lily beside him, Lily in her coat and the red scarf she'd insisted on bringing from home because she said red was a good color for important days. Victoria came down the building steps with Nora beside her and stopped on the sidewalk. Ethan looked at her face. He read it the way he read things that mattered, carefully, without filling in what he wanted to see. 5-2, she said. Something moved through his expression. Not surprise, he'd never seemed to need news to validate what he expected. Just a settling, like something that had been held in tension releasing into place. "Okay," he said. "There's going to be an investigation, months of it probably, and a company that needs rebuilding, and a board that needs trust restored, and about 50 things I haven't thought of yet." She stood on the sidewalk in the cold morning air and let the list of it sit without trying to organize it. "But today it's okay." Lily looked up at her. "Did you win?" she asked. Victoria looked at the child, red scarf, direct eyes, the absolute confidence of someone who had never seriously considered the alternative. "Yeah," she said. "I did." Lily nodded. "I knew," she said. Not smug, certain. There was a difference. "Can we get food? I've been standing here for a long time." Nora made a sound that was almost a laugh. She excused herself with the brisk efficiency of a woman who had 3 other fires burning and had given this particular fire everything it needed. She shook Victoria's hand, properly, firmly, and walked away. Ethan looked at Victoria. "There's a diner 2 blocks over," he said. "Lily has vetted it." "I looked in the window," Lily clarified. "The booths are good." Victoria looked at both of them. This man and his daughter, standing on a midtown sidewalk on a cold Friday morning because a flight had been canceled in a snowstorm and a decision had been made in an airport terminal about what kind of person to be. "Okay," she said. They walked 2 blocks in the cold, Lily between them, talking about the booths with the authority of someone who had strong opinions about seating and wasn't embarrassed about it. The city moved around them in its ordinary way. People going to things, coming from things, not particularly interested in any of the 3 people on the sidewalk who had just come from something that had mattered. In the diner, in a booth that Lily declared adequate, they ordered breakfast food at 11:30 in the morning. Lily got pancakes, Ethan got eggs and coffee. Victoria ordered the same thing as Ethan without looking at the menu, and he didn't comment on it. They sat in the booth and the food came and they ate it. Lily talked about the Nor'easter Project, now expanded to include a section on the specific meteorological conditions at Newark Airport on the night in question, which she planned to document with photographs she'd taken on Ethan's phone. Ethan said the teacher was going to think he'd put her up to it. Lily said that was the teacher's problem. Victoria ate her eggs and listened and felt the particular weight of the week beginning, slowly, to lift. Not all at once. Not cleanly, but enough to notice. At some point, Lily reached across the table and took one of Victoria's bacon strips without asking. Victoria looked at the empty space on her plate, then at Lily, who was eating the bacon without remorse. You could have asked, Victoria said. You weren't going to eat it, Lily said. You don't know that. You've been eating slow and looking around, Lily said. People who are paying attention to their food eat it at normal speed. She tilted her head. Dad does that too, when he's thinking about other things. Victoria looked at Ethan. He was looking at his coffee cup. She's not wrong, he said. I know, Victoria said. She gave Lily the other piece of bacon, which Lily accepted as the natural conclusion of a reasonable argument, and Victoria looked out the diner window at the street and thought about a canceled flight and a snowstorm and the particular arithmetic of how small things add up to everything. She wasn't sure what came next. She knew there was an investigation, and a company, and months of complicated work, and on the other side of all of that, something she hadn't fully let herself picture yet. She knew there was a man sitting across from her who had walked into something difficult without being asked and had stayed without being asked to stay. She knew there was a child eating her bacon and drawing floor plans with stars in the corners and talking about weather systems with the earnest thoroughness of someone who found the world genuinely interesting. She didn't know what any of it meant in any ordered way, but she knew what it felt like, sitting in this booth, and she knew it was something she intended to pay attention to. The investigation took 4 months. That was the short version. The longer version involved 3 law firms, 2 regulatory bodies, a forensic audit that expanded 3 times beyond its original scope, and a Tuesday afternoon in February when Damien Vale's attorney called Nora Vance to discuss terms. Nora called Victoria immediately after. Victoria was in a meeting and stepped out into the hallway and listened and said very little. When she hung up, she stood in the corridor for about 30 seconds, her hand still on the phone, and let the thing she'd been carrying since a snowstorm in Newark finally put itself down. She went back into the meeting. She did not tell anyone what the call had been. She finished the agenda item they'd been discussing, which was about software integration timelines and had nothing to do with any of it. And she was glad to have something ordinary to finish. Damien settled. That was the legal word for it. Settlement, which meant he signed documents agreeing to repay the identified funds, relinquish all equity positions and any remaining company ties, and accept a consent decree that would follow his name into every boardroom he tried to enter for the rest of his professional life. In exchange, the matter was resolved without a criminal referral, which his attorney had worked very hard to obtain, and which Nora had agreed to after a conversation with Victoria that lasted 2 hours and covered a lot of ground that wasn't strictly legal. You could push for prosecution, Nora had said. The evidentiary package is strong enough. Claire's work would hold up. I know, Victoria had said. It would be a public process. Long. You'd be in it for at least 18 months. I know that too. Nora had waited. What I want, Victoria had said, is for it to be over. I want the money back. I want him out. And I want to go build something without this attached to every conversation for the next 2 years. She'd looked at the table. Is that weakness? No, Nora had said, with a directness that left no room to question it. That's knowing what you actually want instead of what you're supposed to want. So Damien signed, and it was over, and Victoria stood in a hospital corridor on a Tuesday in February and felt the weight of it leave and did not perform anything about that for anyone. Stuart Birch resigned in January. He came to Victoria's office and did it in person, which she respected. He sat across from her desk looking like a man who had done the math on his choices and found the sum worse than he'd expected. I thought he was going to win, Stuart said. I want to be honest with you about that. I didn't do it because he threatened me. He didn't have to. I looked at what he'd built inside the board structure, and I thought he was going to win, and I made a calculation. About your position, Victoria said. Yes. She looked at him. Stuart was a good operator. He understood logistics and people and the mechanics of how organizations actually functioned versus how they were supposed to. She'd promoted him because of that. Did he offer you anything? She said. The COO title under the new structure, he said, which I would have kept, with expanded authority. She nodded slowly. How long were you talking to him before Friday? 6 weeks. 6 weeks. While she'd been investigating, while she'd been building the case, while she'd been in the Halstead Street apartment at 2 a.m. finding the thread, Stuart had been 6 weeks into a conversation with Damien about what came after. She was quiet for a moment, not performing calm, actually deciding what she felt about it, which took a second. "I don't hate you for it," she said. "I want you to know that's true and not just something I'm saying." She looked at the desk. "But I also can't have you here. Not because of what you did, because of why you did it. You saw which way the wind was blowing and you moved. That's a skill. It's just not the skill I need from the person running operations." Stewart nodded. He'd known it was coming. "I'll make sure the transition is handled right," he said. "I know you will," she said. "That's who you actually are. I think you forgot that for 6 weeks." He left. She sat in the empty office for a while. Not sad exactly. More like accounting, going through what the last year had cost and being honest about the total without letting it become a story about how she'd been wronged. She had been wronged. That was true. It was also true that she'd made choices that left openings. Chosen a man because she confused his understanding of power with understanding of her. Given board seats to people she hadn't vetted because she'd trusted the introduction. Built a company with both hands and guarded it with neither. She was 30 years old and she knew more than she had known 12 months ago. And the cost of that knowledge was real, and she was going to pay it honestly and not spend too long tallying it up. She had work to do. In March, she announced the new company. It wasn't dramatic. A press release, a small gathering of the people who'd agreed to help her build it. A conversation with 2 investors who'd known her long enough to say yes before she'd finished the pitch. The name was Viridian Health Technologies. The mission was what it had always been, making diagnostic systems work better for the hospitals that couldn't afford to make them work better on their own. Rural facilities, underfunded urban clinics, places that were doing the work without the infrastructure. It was a smaller company than what she'd left. She was starting from a different place. Not from nothing. She'd done that once, and the knowledge of how it went was in her bones. But from a cleared space. She'd ensured the original company was stable before she stepped away. The board had voted in a new CEO. An internal candidate, a woman named Renata Fuentes, who'd been running product development for 3 years and had the particular combination of technical rigor and human intelligence that the role required. Victoria had recommended her, and Harlan Kotz had seconded the nomination before she'd finished the sentence. She kept a minority board seat in the original company, which Harlan had asked her to maintain because he was 71 and not getting younger, and he wanted someone at the table who remembered why the thing had been built. She agreed. The morning Viridian opened its doors, technically a set of borrowed offices in a building in Jersey City, not Midtown, because she was building this one without the overhead she didn't need. She stood in the main room before anyone else arrived. The furniture was secondhand except for the server hardware, which was not. The windows looked out on a parking structure and a slice of sky. It smelled like fresh paint and takeout containers from the night before, when she and the 3 engineers she'd hired had stayed until midnight doing something to the network infrastructure that she had understood in principle and not in practice. She stood in the room and felt the particular feeling of a beginning that isn't clean, that has weight from other things attached to it, that knows what failure looks like in a way a first start doesn't. It wasn't uncomplicated. She'd be lying to herself if she called it purely hopeful. But it was hers, in the way that mattered, the way that doesn't have a cleaner word than that. She made coffee and waited for her team. Okay. Ethan brought Lily to the opening. He hadn't been asked, or rather, Victoria had mentioned the date without attaching a request to it, which was a pattern she'd developed over the 4 months since the board meeting, the pattern of offering information and leaving space. He'd recognized the space and stepped into it. They arrived 20 minutes after opening. Lily had made a card. It was construction paper folded in half, with a drawing on the front that depicted what appeared to be a building with a flag on top. And inside, in the specific handwriting of a child who had recently been told about margins and was ignoring them, it read, "To Victoria. You took it back. Love, Lily." Victoria read it twice. Then she set it on her desk in the office she'd claimed as hers, the smaller one, because she'd given the better lit room to the engineering team. "Thank you," she said to Lily. "I made it myself," Lily said. "Dad said he'd help, but I said no." "It's very good," Victoria said. "I know," Lily said without self-consciousness, and went to examine the window view of the parking structure with the interest of someone assessing a situation. Ethan stood in the doorway of the small office. He looked around, at the second-hand desk, the server equipment visible through the glass wall into the main room, the card now propped against Victoria's laptop. "How does it feel?" he asked. "Smaller," she said. "In a good way. Like something I can actually put my arms around." He nodded. "The last one got too big to feel like yours." "The last one became a thing to protect," she said. "This one is still a thing to build." She looked around the room. "I think I needed to know the difference before I could do it right." He leaned against the doorframe. "Are you scared?" "Yes," she said, immediately, which was a different answer than she would have given 4 months ago. 4 months ago, she would have said no or would have qualified it into something more manageable. "I'm scared it'll go wrong in ways I don't see coming. I'm scared I'll build it right and lose it anyway. I'm scared of making the same choices I made before because they were familiar." She paused. "I'm also not going to let it stop me, which is, I think that's the only thing I've ever actually known how to do. Move through it instead of around it," he said. She looked at him. He'd said the same thing to her in a kitchen in Jersey City 4 months ago, about the board meeting, about the obstacles being the path. She hadn't forgotten it. She hadn't forgotten much about those 4 days. "Yes," she said. Quote, they had dinner that evening, the 3 of them, at a place near Ethan's apartment in Newark that Lily had nominated and that turned out to serve Vietnamese-style sandwiches that Lily described as the best thing she'd eaten in her entire life, which Ethan noted she said approximately once a month about different foods. "That doesn't make it less true," Lily said. "It makes the claim statistically unreliable," Ethan said. "I stand behind all of them," Lily said. Victoria ate her sandwich and listened and felt not happy, exactly, not the simple version of that, but something that had more texture than happy, something that had earned its warmth. At some point, Lily put down her sandwich and looked at Victoria with the direct, judicial attention she deployed for important things. "Are you going to keep coming around?" she asked. "Lily," Ethan said. "It's a real question," Lily said. "I want to know." Victoria looked at the child. 8 years old, red scarf, because red was a good color for important days, and apparently no intention of allowing significant things to go unaddressed because the adults in the room found them awkward. "I think so," Victoria said, "if that's all right." Lily considered this for exactly as long as it deserved. "It's all right," she said, and went back to the sandwich. Ethan was looking at his coffee. Victoria was looking at the table. Neither of them said anything about what had just been decided, because some decisions don't need to be converted into a larger statement. They just need to be made and honored, and that's the whole of it. It took longer than that. It always does. There were months of separate lives running in parallel. Ethan's work, Victoria's company, Lily's school year, which contained its own complete world of projects and conflicts and discoveries that had nothing to do with any of the adult things happening around her. There were evenings that were easy and evenings that were complicated, and a particular Saturday in April when Victoria and Ethan had a disagreement about something small that was actually about something large, and it lasted 3 days before she called him and said what it had actually been about, and he said what he'd been carrying on his side, and they stayed on the phone for an hour afterward talking about something else entirely. It wasn't clean. That was the thing she'd had to learn, and he'd had to learn to let himself want something that wasn't guaranteed. He'd gotten very good at not wanting things that could be taken away. It was a skill the military had sharpened in him and fatherhood had deepened, this ability to pour everything into what was present and ask nothing of the future. Victoria moved into his life like something the future had sent early, and he'd had to learn, slowly and imperfectly, to let that be okay. Lily made it easier. Lily made most complicated things easier by refusing to treat them as complicated. She liked Victoria because Victoria talked to her like a person, answered her questions without softening them, and once spent 45 minutes helping her research weather patterns for a school project with an earnestness that Lily recognized as genuine and filed away accordingly. She didn't perform acceptance of Victoria. She just accepted her, the way children accept things that make sense to them before adults have found the language to explain why they make sense. By summer, the shape of things had settled into something that wasn't finished but felt real. Dinners, weekends, the ordinary accumulation of small moments that don't announce themselves as significant and turn out to be the only things that are. In July, On a Thursday evening after Lily had gone to sleep, Ethan and Victoria sat on the small back porch of his house in Newark. Nothing fancy, a narrow concrete rectangle with a folding table and two chairs that didn't quite match. And she told him about something she'd been thinking about. "I've been thinking about what I was trying to prove," she said. He looked at her. The evening was warm, and the neighborhood was doing its summer thing, someone's music from down the block, the smell of someone's dinner. "When I built the first company," she said, "I told myself it was about the mission, making diagnostics work for the hospitals that needed it, and that was true. But there was something underneath it." She turned her glass in her hands. Water, not wine. She'd stopped drinking the way she used to drink, which was like someone managing their altitude. "I was proving something. To my father, who didn't live to see it. To every investor who made me wait in the lobby before they saw me. To myself, mostly, for the years I spent thinking I'd missed the window." She paused. "The problem with building something to prove something is that it never actually proves it. You just have to keep building more." "And now?" he said. "Now I'm building because I want to see it work," she said. "Which sounds simple." "It's not simple." "No," she said. "It took losing everything I built to understand that I'd built it with not the wrong reason, but the wrong thing underneath the reason." Ethan was quiet for a moment. He looked at the small square of evening sky above the porch. "I did that with the service," he said. "Stayed longer than I should have because leaving felt like admitting something, like I hadn't found what I was looking for." He paused. "Took Lily being born and me being home for 2 days before I shipped out again, and looking at her and thinking, what exactly am I trying to finish out there?" "What did you decide?" "That I was already where it mattered," he said. "That whatever I was looking for, I'd stopped needing it and hadn't noticed." Victoria looked at him. The light was going the way summer evening light goes, slowly, warmly, without urgency. "I think that's what this is," she said. Not performing certainty, not hedging it either, just saying it plainly, which was the way she'd learned to say things that mattered since a night in an airport when a man had walked across a terminal and changed the direction of something she couldn't have mapped in advance. "Yeah," he said. "I think so too." They sat on the porch while the evening finished itself, not filling the quiet because they'd both learned that silence between people who understand each other isn't empty. There's a thing about the way storms work that Lily put in her science project in the last paragraph, which her teacher read aloud to the class, and which Ethan heard about secondhand and then read himself when she brought the paper home with the grade she announced before he'd opened the door. "A nor'easter gets its power from 2 air masses meeting," Lily had written. "One is cold and one is warm, and when they run into each other, the result is stronger than either one would have been on its own. Scientists call this a collision, but I think it is more like a combination. Both air masses change. The storm that comes out is something that neither one could have made alone." Ethan read it twice. He put it on the refrigerator. Victoria read it when she came over the following weekend and stood in front of the refrigerator for a moment longer than you'd stand in front of a child's school project. "She wrote this herself?" she said. "She refused help," he said. "On principle." Victoria looked at it a moment longer. Then she turned around and went to help Lily with something she was doing at the kitchen table, and Ethan watched them from the doorway. His daughter and this woman, heads bent over whatever small, serious project Lily had assembled, talking in the low, focused way of two people who had decided to take each other seriously. He stood in the doorway for a while. He thought about a canceled flight, a storm, a terminal full of people who'd looked away. He thought about the particular arithmetic of how a single decision, to cross a room, to say something, to stay when staying wasn't required, multiplies out in directions you couldn't have calculated in advance. He'd spent 14 years training for the moments that mattered. He'd gotten very good at identifying threat, at managing crisis, at holding a line when lines needed to be held. What the training hadn't covered, what nobody covers because it doesn't fit a curriculum, was this: the ordinary moments that turn out to be the extraordinary ones. The thing that changes everything doesn't usually announce itself. It arrives looking like a Tuesday, like a delay, like a stranger in an airport who needs someone to notice. He had noticed. That was all. He'd walked across a room because someone needed him to, and everything else had been the result of that one movement. Everything that had found its way into his life since, and Lily's, and the life of the woman at his kitchen table who had built something worth protecting and learned. The hard way, and then the real way. What protection actually looked like. It didn't look like control. It didn't look like power or money or the careful architecture of influence that Damien Vale had spent years constructing around himself like a fortress, only to find it wasn't a fortress at all. It was a trap. And he'd built it around himself, and he'd stood inside it watching his own choices close in. What protection actually looked like was simpler and harder than any of that. It looked like showing up. It looked like staying in the room. It looked like a man in an armchair at 1 a.m. while a woman rebuilt her case at a kitchen table, and neither of them making a production of it because the point wasn't the gesture. The point was the presence. Victoria looked up from the table and caught his eye across the kitchen. She didn't smile exactly. Something quieter than that. The look of someone who knows they're being seen and doesn't need to perform anything about it. He nodded, the small nod of someone who has said what he means and means what he said. He went into the kitchen to make coffee. Lily looked up when he came in. "Dad," she said, "Victoria says the room with the star in the corner should face east." He looked at Victoria. She was looking at the drawing, the floor plan, which Lily had apparently retrieved and continued to develop, which was on its 6th iteration now, with annotations in 2 different ink colors. "Does she?" he said. "East-facing rooms get morning light," Victoria said without looking up. "It makes a difference." "She's right," Lily said, with the tone of someone who has obtained expert confirmation. "I've updated it." Ethan looked at the drawing, looked at his daughter, looked at the woman who had come into their lives through a canceled flight and a storm and a choice he made in under 10 seconds in an airport terminal that he had never once regretted. "Okay," he said, "east-facing." He made the coffee. Lily kept annotating. Victoria kept consulting. The kitchen was warm and the evening was coming, and outside the window the neighborhood was doing its ordinary summer thing, and none of it was cinematic or clean or wrapped in the kind of resolution that closes everything neatly. It was better than that. It was real and ongoing, and theirs, built from the ordinary material of people who had chosen to be present for each other, which is the only material that holds. Some storms leave damage. Some storms clear the air. The best ones. The ones you don't see coming on an ordinary winter night in a crowded terminal when your flight has been canceled and you have nowhere to be and a little girl is sleeping on your shoulder. Those ones bring you something you didn't know you were waiting for and change the weather of your whole life going forward. Ethan Cross had walked into Newark Airport expecting nothing. He'd walked out with everything that mattered.